Good evening and welcome to this Tuesday, September 9th edition of Organic News here on Awake Radio. And we have with us, we're going to get right to it, Les Jamieson, who's been involved with 9/11 Truth for a few years now. So we're just going to talk about the events coming up this week. There's events on Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. 3 days. All for remembering 9/11. Can you tell us what's going to be going on then, Les, coming up this week?
Sure, absolutely. First, thank you for having me on this very, very important show. And starting Thursday, I'll just go right through it day by day here for the 13th anniversary. Thursday morning at 9 a.m., activists will be gathering at Ground Zero at the location of Vijay Street and Church Street, right on that corner or that block. Interestingly, on the day of 9/11, they actually section off a block for protests and alternative thinkers. So that's where we will be from 9 o'clock on, and then at 11 o'clock at that same location there will be a press conference with Richard Gage, who is founder of Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth. This organization has done spectacular work and has really been at the vanguard of this movement for the last several years. They are sponsoring these events for the most part for these 3 days, and of course it's so important to have them here because Richard Gage, who is an architect himself and member of the premier association of professional architects called the American Institute of Architects, he founded this organization with the hope of getting 1,000 architects and engineers to sign on to refute the official account of how the towers came down, and then, of course, to call for a new investigation, and at this point there are over 2,250. So the organization's work has been so significant, and we'll talk later about the recent media breakthrough because he was recently interviewed on C-SPAN on the Washington Journal morning talk show. So, but I'll get back to the schedule for the moment.
Okay.
That's at 11 a.m., the press conference. Then at 2 p.m., we will be screening the premiere, the NYC premiere of a brand new documentary called Anatomy of a Great Deception.
And what time is that going to be at?
That's 2 p.m.
Oh, 2 o'clock. At that same location?
That is going to be at Theater 80.
Oh, that's right. Okay.
Which is at 80 St. Mark's Place in the East Village.
Right.
Okay? And by the way, all of these details can be found and downloaded at Architects and Engineers website, which is ae911truth.org. That's ae911truth.org. So it's all there. So that'll be a fantastic event to see this new film. Catherine, would you like me to just say a little bit about the film?
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah, it's about this gentleman's experience coming to his own awakening of the reality of 9/11 and the official deception, and how those towers actually came down, and then how that, after many years, believing the official story, coming to this realization which just turned his whole world upside down, and he wanted to share it with friends and family, and they rejected his whole viewpoint, and they just couldn't deal with it. And then this film is about the story of how they slowly came around, and it contains much of the research of architects and engineers for 9/11 Truth. So there's a lot of it's all factual data, and then his personal experience with coming to terms with that factual data, and his personal relationships, his family, his loved ones, and how they finally came around. So
Is this
That's the gist.
Is this the same man that's going to be speaking this year? I saw it in the schedule. Someone who survived 9/11 was going to be one of the speakers. You're not talking about the same person now, are you?
No,
Okay.
that's an entirely different individual. Yes. Well,
can you say the name?
I'll work up to that. Yeah, that's on Saturday. So why don't I just go sequentially? And I'll definitely cover this individual who's a survivor of the South Tower because he's speaking out for the first time. Absolutely. Okay, then after the film, we'll be doing a mini march to Union Square that's a handout literature to the public with a message, 9/11 truth is good for America. Very important message because this is the catalyst when it comes to enabling people to have the deepest understanding of the geopolitics of the military-industrial establishment and the agenda for empire that has driven this country since the beginning and is actually in hyper modes over the last, since 9/11 for sure. So we'll be sharing the news here through the truth of 9/11. People can come to understand how our policy is put together not only abroad but at home, and especially in the realm of civil liberties and what we can do here to by coming to the realization of the truth, we can then work to redirect our future. That's why 9/11 Truth is good for America. So we'll be doing this mini march to Union Square to share that message.
Yeah, we actually...
Then at 8...
Okay, go ahead, finish.
Yeah, then at 8 p.m., this is just to finish here for Thursday, there will be the premiere play of a one-woman play by the daughter of Lori Van Auken, one of the main Jersey girls. And she wrote a play called This Is Not About 9/11. And so that's going to be great.
It's called It's Not About... Sorry, Les, you said it's not about 9/11. Is that what you said?
Yes, that's the name of the play.
Okay.
Yeah. So before I go on to Friday, did you have something you'd like to ask?
I was going to say that we had Richard Gage on, I think it was 2 weeks ago, talking about, the architects and engineers for 9/11 Truth and mostly about focusing on Building 7 and just the mathematics of it all was mostly what the discussion was based around. And it's nice to hear that you guys are just now being called alternative thinkers instead of conspiracy theorists. So it's like being upgraded.
Well, that's the objective, to show that we are not conspiracy theorists. We're researchers, we are detectives, and we're historians, we're analysts, and in terms of the organization, architects and engineers, these are people that are professionals. They're highly educated in the building sciences and in physics, etc. So, yeah, these people are professionals. These are not your average run-of-the-mill, layperson who is just talking from opinion. No, everything that they say is based on scientific and forensic method.
Right.
There you go.
They just want to bring people to just question things because again the official story is just, it's so quick, like they do everything so quick. The government does everything so fast, they want to just wrap it up, quick, and they got the culprits, they know who did it, everything. It's like, all within whatever, 48 hours. And, heaven forbid, people want to actually say, hey, wait a minute, take the time and hey, let's look at that again. Kind of.
Yeah, you're right, Catherine. Within an hour, they had Osama bin Laden's face on TV. Within 24 hours, they had these 19 supposed hijackers on TV. Right away. And that is an important marker or indication of a false flag operation, just like the Kennedy assassination. Right away, they had Oswald. So they did the very same thing here. Yeah, you're absolutely right. And then they stonewalled any actual investigation after that point. So that's a whole topic, whole discussion right there about what occurred in terms of, first there was the Joint Senate Inquiry Panel, and there's some important developments happening there as well. In that report that they produced, this is before the 9/11 Commission, which only occurred 14 months later after the lobbying by 9/11 family members and first responders survivors. So, but first there was the Joint Inquiry, which is in the news lately, Catherine. Guess what? There were 28 pages that were completely redacted. And Senator Bob Graham of Florida, former Senator Bob Graham, has been pointing to this right from the very beginning, saying, why is this being redacted? Why is this being classified? This is important information, and there's nothing in this that has to do with national security. Well, after all these years and after a big lawsuit by many 9/11 family members to release this information, now there's an effort in Congress with 70 congressmen pushing to make legislation to release these 28 redacted pages.
And what is it?
This has been.
What is in them?
Mm-hmm.
What is in these redacted, and these redacted pages?
Information about funding from Saudi Arabia and culpability, basically, by U.S. agencies being involved in knowing about this and trying to cover it up.
Right. I was actually, I just brought up on my screen the article that I believe I told you about a few weeks ago, and I sent it to you, called Zim Shipping, New Evidence Suggests 6 months foreknowledge of the September 11th attack and potential involvement in the Israeli deep cover operation. This is actually a little bit of a different article than the other one, but, right, it goes into talking about Zim American Israeli Shipping Company that had foreknowledge, and they moved to Virginia, I believe, just before 9/11. And if anybody wants to look it up, just look up Zim, ZIM Shipping foreknowledge of 9/11, and it gets into this whole story, fast tracking the development of their Norfolk, Virginia office to guarantee its completion by September 4th, 2001, when they still had a perfectly fine office space at the World Trade Center with an existing 4.5-year, $8 million lease obligation. So they're just trying to, it's like, why did this company feel this rush to leave the World Trade Center and get out of the when they had this perfectly good lease? I mean, it just goes in, into all of this stuff.
Yeah.
I don't Yeah, I don't know if you had time.
Cool.
Like over here it says Zim and other Israeli groups' potential involvement in the 9/11 deep cover operation. It's got dates like March 1996. Zim Shipping extends its lease. Oh, it looks like, did we lose somebody? Yes, it sounds like we lost Les. Let me try to get him back. Oh, I think he's coming back. Trying to get him back.
Sorry about that. I don't know what happened, but I'm back.
Okay, well, I'm glad. So, like, what exactly are you, I guess, in particular, like, going with the whole 9/11 true thing? I mean, like, what do you believe happened?
What do I believe is happened? Well, I believe that, personally, the Project for New American Century put out a document called Rebuilding America's Defenses, in which they laid the groundwork saying that the U.S. needs to transform its military, and the American people would not support it absent a catastrophic catalyzing event like a new Pearl Harbor. So I believe that's what 9/11 was. It's pretty clear, when you put it all together. And that also in the document, they state that the goal is full spectrum dominance. Well, that's pretty clear because the U.S. has been involved in wars abroad ever since. And according to General Wesley Clark, there was already an agenda to invade and create regime change in 7 Middle Eastern countries. It was already in place. And then add the fact that there was the Patriot Act had to be in place so that this full spectrum dominance included right here within the U.S. And so that's what I believe 9/11 was about. And who, as far as who did it, obviously it was a very sophisticated operation that had to be coming from a military intelligence level, sort of like the shadow government capability that has been in place for decades and decades that we, I think, most recently saw on a large scale revealed during the Iran-Contra hearings, and then BCCI scandal where this bank was laundering money for the CIA, and so this is what goes on here in this shadow government, and it's part of an agenda that very, very possibly was through a partnership of several intelligence agencies and covert ops groups, and where they came from. These are globalists. These are globalists.
What do you want to say to people who just don't think that the government is capable of doing these things? Like people that just don't want to believe that their own government is capable of, doing, engaging in these behaviors.
As far as being, how should I say, evil enough. When you say capable, I don't know, do you mean like technologically,
right,
or
like,
do you mean that they don't?
Emotionally capable, like, of course, yeah, technologically and as far as weaponry, yeah, sure. They're capable.
Oh, yeah, they're experts.
And
experts at war, experts at destruction. Now, whether the question is it difficult for people to believe that people within our own government could be that evil to do this?
Right.
It's just too much to comprehend. Just look, there have been human experiments. Our government has conducted human experiments for decades, not caring whatsoever about the well-being of the public. Look at how our government allows contamination, toxic pollution, nuclear waste. The government. Look at how the government allowed the tobacco industry to lie for decades and decades that tobacco, doesn't cause cancer. And it just goes on. Look how the government is suppressing cancer cures. Look at how the government is suppressing alternative energy sources that are green and renewable.
Isn't it true, though,
It goes on and on.
Isn't it true, though, that, the government isn't really the government and that corporations really, are the government now, especially, since Citizens United? I mean, where, corporations can give unlimited amounts of money to politicians. I mean, that's like, hello. It doesn't get any more obvious. I think I heard something recently about that being slightly or somewhat reversed. Like someone in Congress is stepping up and trying to reverse that. But as far as I know, it's still going on, or it's might be being reversed now, but not after so much money has already been, infecting the political system.
Sure. Yeah, there was a vote today, as a matter of fact, to allow for further work to overturn it, to go for what's called a constitutional amendment, which will require, I believe, 2/3 of the Senate. But it is, as of today, moving forward. So there was good news on that. Yeah. And yes, I agree. The government, there's actually, I think there are 3 governments. Okay, there's the facade government. That's what we see on TV. The politicians debating and
right.
All that, and then you have the covert government, or the shadow government, and then you have the corporate government, which has really become increasingly dominant because of the way that they have highly paid lobbyists that influence and finance political campaigns, and which is what Citizens United is all about. And this is the way it's been for the longest time. So let's face it, we have at least those 3 governments. We have the facade government, we have the covert government, and we have the corporate government. That's what I see. Yeah. Catherine, you want to cover the Friday and Saturday events?
Oh yeah, sure. We have like 5 more minutes. So go ahead.
Okay. Well, Friday will be at Ground Zero at 10 a.m. Right by the new Memorial Park at the corner of Greenwich and Liberty Streets, just 1 block west of Zuccotti Park. Then at 3 o'clock, Times Square, everybody, at 8th Avenue and 42nd Street, because there is a new billboard, a digital billboard showing the collapse of Building 7. That's just a groundbreaker. Then at 7:30, we're going to be at the 6th Street Community Center for a 9/11 Truth Cafe music and social event. Okay, so that's Friday. Again, this is all at ae911truth.org. Okay, then on Saturday, 10 a.m., back at Ground Zero by the park there Liberty and Greenwich Streets. Then at 2 p.m., back at Theater 80, at 80 St. Mark's Place, where we will be having a symposium called 9/11, The Awakening Goes Mainstream. We're going to have speakers Richard Gage, Mark Crispin Miller, Wayne Madsen, William Pepper, Rudy Dent, a firefighter, and this is where we will have the 9/11 survivors speaking out for the first time after many years, 13 years here, of incredible story. And he has photos to share that have never been released of the South Tower and, of course, the North Tower, and then the day after he was there taking pictures.
And it's
we're supposed to be there.
It's
very dramatic.
And so his name isn't going to be revealed until Saturday?
Yes.
Okay. I just also wanted to okay. Sorry, I just lost my train of thought. So that's Thursday, Friday, and Saturday of all these events that are going to be taking place. And that's Michael Rupert. He is not going to be. That's what I was going to say. Michael Rupert won't be with us. I want to really encourage people to look up Michael C. Rupert, who really put forth so much in trying to get people to just look at things about 9/11. I have his book, Crossing the Rubicon. It's a pretty thick book. I haven't finished all of it, and it's a lot of information. I mean, it's quite in depth. And I also wanted to mention Sibel Edmonds. I read her Classified Woman book, which also talks a bit about the foreknowledge of the events of 9/11. So too bad she's not able to speak. She would be a good speaker.
Yeah, well, what's interesting, she's had a gag order, even though she spoke out for a while, and of course she gave, I think, 3 hours of testimony to the 9/11 Commission, and guess what? It was suppressed. All right, it was suppressed. It's never been released. Now, I just heard Tom King, who he was being interviewed, I believe, on CNN about the 28 redacted pages that I shared about earlier. And Tom King says, I don't know why this has been classified, and for that matter, I don't know why there's anything classified about the investigation.
Exactly.
That is a significant statement, because there is a lot of classified information here, which includes the testimony of Sibel Edmonds and William Rodriguez.
Yeah, well, there's so much to talk about. Unfortunately, the next guest is waiting to come on, Les, but I just wanted to thank you. And again, so it's the website that people can go to find the schedule for Thursday, Friday, and Saturday is?
Yeah, ae911truth.org. That's ae911truth.org. Yeah, and if anybody would like to contact me, especially if you'd like to participate with our actions here in New York, we're flyering just about every Saturday at Ground Zero. They can email me at Les, that's LES, at ae911truth.org. That's Les at ae911truth.org.
Les at ae911truth.org. Les Jamieson, I want to thank you very much, and I'll be seeing you on Thursday. Please don't go. Great. Thank you so much. Please don't go.
Bye-bye.
You're welcome. Please don't go away. We're going to take a short break and come back with journalist and teacher at Trinity College, Vijay Prashad. Thank you and for sticking and tuning in for us in this second half an hour with Vijay Prashad, who is a professor of international studies at Trinity College. He's the author of several books, including Arab Spring, Libyan Winter, and most recently, The Poorer Nations, A Possible History of the Global South. And I want to welcome you, Vijay Prashad, to Organic News here on Awake Radio. And I wanted to have you on because it's really important for people to know what's going on in Libya. And I mean, I'm going to admit that the Israel-Gaza situation is what I've been focusing on a lot lately, and I don't know enough about Libya. And from listening to you, I'm learning, and people do need to know what's going on over there. So,
well, yeah, go ahead.
I made some notes. You were opposed to the U.S. intervention that ousted Gaddafi. And
yes, I was very much opposed to the NATO intervention, actually, that the United States was at the center of.
And why is that?
Well, there are many reasons. The first reason is that if you look at the history of U.S. aerial bombardment, and if you take, say, the most immediate case before Libya, which was Iraq, what the U.S. aerial bombardment did, essentially, was to destroy the Iraqi state structure. And having destroyed the Iraqi state structure, destroyed, of course, the ability of Iraqi society to have any kind of ordering mechanism.
Right.
And Iraq fell apart very shortly after 2003. Chaos is the greatest host of the most dangerous tendencies in the world. So in Libya, I was very aware that there were sections of Libyan society, minority sections, but nonetheless sections of Libyan society that had been deeply radicalized by, fighting in Afghanistan, fighting in Iraq, fighting in Chechnya. And I feared very much that if the United States and NATO bombed Libya severely, it would destroy, of course, the state, and in the chaos would arise the groups that, in fact, have arisen. So,
right.
For instance, in Benghazi, there was no organized Al-Qaeda type group before the Americans bombed Libya. And during the uprising in 2011, the radical groups in Benghazi created an outfit called Ansar al-Sharia, which, of course, came into prominence in 2012 when it has been alleged to have killed the U.S. ambassador. So, in other words, I recognize that when you aerial bomb a society in the way NATO and the United States have done, you create chaos. And in chaos comes very dangerous groups that don't represent the majority of the population, but nonetheless take advantage of the chaos. That was the principal reason I opposed the U.S. bombing.
I mean, listening to you, I can't help but just feel like it sounds so similar to what I've heard, in the documentary Dirty Wars. Jeremy Scahill says the same thing. It's, all it does is create terrorism. I mean, the United States, from what you just said, like they're supposed to be coming in, as the cure, as the fix. But, just coming in with all this aggression, I mean, like they're not like setting any kind of an example. And so like what do they expect the response to their their complete out of controlness to be? Like they're blaming the effect and the way that other people are responding to what they do without looking at the fact that they're creating it.
Well, yeah, I mean, look, the other thing is that, Yes, you're right. One is the idea that the actual cure becomes, in a sense, the spur or the cause rather than the cure.
Exactly.
Yeah, that I accept. But there's something even worse than that, and that is the illusion of humanitarianism and the illusion that without American action, the world will be in chaos. So, for instance, in Libya, it had already been the case by the first 3 weeks of the uprising in Benghazi that the Gaddafi government had been greatly weakened. And any political maneuver at that point, with a weakened Mr. Gaddafi, would have seen some kind of mechanism of transformation of Libyan politics. But rather than allow that process to take place, NATO essentially bombed the Gaddafi regime out of existence and short-circuited what should have been a protracted political process that would have come out of some kind of warfare. No doubt there would have been some loss of life further. But by the way, the NATO bombardment was not, without a loss of life. We don't know how many people actually ended up being killed in the NATO bombardment because NATO has directly refused a United Nations investigation of their bombardment. Twice has been asked by UN agencies to investigate the bombardment and both times refused to do so. So, if the political process had taken place, one never knows what the outcome would have been. It may have been different from the kind of vortex of chaos that is now Libya.
Right. I heard you say that the U.S. levels countries and then expects them to create a democracy on top of that.
Yeah, it's amazing. There is a very, I think, well-established right-wing ideology which believes in the tabula rasa, in the clean slate. So, for instance, during the invasion of Iraq, the neoconservatives actually believe that if you destroy the state, you completely dismantle it, then you can build a free market paradise, that will be, in a sense, with a weak state, and you allow, some kind of Ayn Randian paradise to be created. Well, these were, 30-year-old college Republicans who hadn't very much real-world experience, and most of them had never traveled to Iraq or the region before. So they were actually living in a fantasy land. When you destroy the Iraqi state, you're not going to create an Ayn Randian paradise. You're going to create the basis for the Islamic State of Iraq and Al-Sham. And exactly that is what happened in Iraq. It took longer in Iraq, for the Al-Qaeda types to gain the footing, and that's because Iraq is a much more resilient, more complicated country. It was short-circuited in Libya. It happened much faster. But you see, both Iraq and Libya are right now suffering the same fate. And the author of that fate isn't some mythical Islam. It's exactly the nature of this kind of immense Western bombardment.
Do you see any similarities in what's going on with Libya as is going on with Israel and Gaza?
Well, there is a great similarity, and I'll tell you the similarity is this. The Israelis don't understand what they're doing in Gaza. When you treat a small number of people, 2 million people, and you keep them essentially in prison for 20 years, let's forget from 1948 onward, let's just say in this last 20 years, and this generation of people, majority young people, are essentially incarcerated. They are in a position of great psychosocial stress. They've been bombed in 2014, 2012, 2009, 2006, and backwards. Immense psychosocial stress. Right. It is remarkable to me that even one organization, whether it's Hamas or it's the Liberation Palestinian, PFLP, DFLP, it's amazing that there remain organizations inside Gaza. One would anticipate that given the level of psychosocial stress, the people of Gaza should have become much more radical than Hamas. In fact, I would have expected them to have fealty to some kind of total kind of totally asocial Al-Qaeda type ideology. It is a remarkable thing. And Israel is fortunate that the people of Palestine have maintained their sanity and continue to fight for national self-determination, which is a rational goal, and have not escalated because of the psychosocial trauma that they live under. So actually, there is a great parallel, but there's also not a parallel. And what is not a parallel is that the Palestinians have been able to remain committed and focused on their principal goal, whereas in Libya and in Iraq, the principal goal has been totally destroyed. These traumatized societies have moved into a position of chaos. In Gaza, there is no chaos. And that is something amazing about the resilience of the Palestinian cause.
Do you think it has anything to do with the fact that in Gaza the people have been so contained, which in a way inadvertently kind of helped them to find their focus, whereas in Libya, that's not the case, so they stay a little bit more scattered?
Well, I think that this has got everything to do with the politics. I mean, I think that one of the important features of the Palestinian struggle is that the Palestinian leadership and the population have been extremely clear about what they want. What they want is national self-determination. And generation upon generation, they have trained people that the goal is national self-determination. That level of focus, that level of national ambition has been quite extraordinary. There are very few examples in world history of a population under colonial rule which has maintained its focus so decidedly, and despite bursts into violent resistance, has maintained its general sense of political resistance. And I think this is something quite remarkable. And whereas the Israelis would like to color in the lines of Palestinian struggle and say it's all about terrorism or rockets of violence, they are doing so in bad faith. I mean, what they need to do is admit or accept that actually the Palestinians have been amazingly modest in their focus. They have not actually pursued the line of all-out war on Israel. They pursued the line of national self-determination. In that sense, I think it's not so much to do with the fact they've been, as it were, contained, but it has everything to do with the fact that there's a clarity of focus on the politics.
I also heard you say that, which I completely agree with, the humanitarian concerns by the U.S. is not authentic.
Yeah, I mean, this is a very interesting issue. It's hard to actually say that the United States or the West is not humanitarian and be taken seriously, because there is an immense expectation that one would admit that they are humanitarian and that they make errors. So what one is supposed to say is, the intention of American policy, for instance, is humanitarian, but of course they make errors. I mean, what I'm actually saying is that I question whether the intent is humanitarian. In other words, I mean, why is it that when Mr. Obama suddenly becomes a humanitarian on the Yazidi population, no doubt in great strain, no doubt tens of thousands of people in great distress, no doubt several hundred perhaps killed, the numbers are not clear. No doubt about all that, and no doubt that the world should have been and was excised about the Yazidi tragedy. But this came shortly after the ceasefire in Gaza. And at no moment in those 50-odd days did the Obama administration publicly lay out the same kind of humanitarian concern as they did in northern Iraq. Now, this is interesting. And it's doubly interesting because in northern Iraq, it was actually not the United States that ended up helping the Yazidis. It was the Kurdish Workers' Party that broke the siege and, helped tens of thousands of Yazidis flee to the province of Rojava in Syria. So not only is the United States fairly selective in its humanitarian utterances or posture, but also when it is, I'd say moved to be humanitarian, it sometimes tries to cover over the fact that other people are taking leadership and have indeed done a great deal in the service of humanitarianism. So not only is there an intent that I'm questioning, but also there are times when the United States wants to suck the humanitarian oxygen out of a room and claim that it is the sole humanitarian. Now, there is no question that there are very many humanitarian-minded people in the United States. There's no question that it's likely Mr. Obama is also very much humanitarian-minded. But there is a selectivity in the humanitarianism, and just because people in the United States are humanitarian doesn't mean that, say, the Kurds are incapable of humanitarianism. I think this arrogance of who is able to help needs to be put aside. When Mr. Obama said, don't worry, America is now coming to help, I mean, come on, gone are the days when people have been watching Western movies and, still expect the cavalry to come charging in. People understand that they are actors in their own history. And this is a kind of illusion that I think America needs to grow up out of.
It sounds a little bit like an oxymoron that people are going to be sort of competing as to who is most humanitarian. It sounds...
Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to show that you're the most humanitarian, I mean, you're not going to be fighting over that. I mean, that's saying one thing and behaving the other.
Well, the interesting thing is, when it comes to making war, the United States seeks a coalition of the willing. When it comes to doing humanitarian things, it doesn't want to share the burden. It likes to appear to go on its own. And there is a kind of unilateralism of humanitarianism that I think we need to get, away from. Why is it that there are coalitions of the willing for war and not enormous global coalitions to help solve world problems?
But then,
I think this is something to think about.
Yeah, then you have to ask yourself, though, who is the U.S. doing it for? Are they really doing it for the other person, or are they doing it for themselves? Because if they're doing it, for the other country, then you do what that country needs. You don't do what you need.
Well, this is true. I mean, really, in a sense, I would like to see somebody who's been in a position of authority explain to me what is the logic of, a statement, for instance, such as Mr. Obama made, which is America's coming to help. I'd like to have some explanation about what that means.
Well, I read a lot of books, and this one guy, this book that I read a long time ago, and he always said that, the one saying that they want to help is usually there to help themselves.
Well, that may be, but I mean, to be honest, like for instance, with there are many cases. There was a big tsunami in the Indian Ocean. Very quickly, because of the scale of American military presence, American Navy was off the coast of Malaysia helping the rescue effort. I mean, I'm not one of those that paints with a very thick brush and paints over everything. I mean, obviously, there are, as I said, in all administrations, there are people who care a great deal about suffering and would like to help. I mean, I think people may often come with the correct intentions. What's wrong is that the framework is incomplete. If you came with a good intention, but you didn't actually realize that, say, the Libyans are capable of helping themselves, then you feel like you need to help. So I'm reticent always to challenge the intentions of people because I think it's sufficient to challenge their framework. And, intentions are very hard to gauge. And making a calumny of somebody's intentions doesn't help me understand them. So the question is the framework is lacking. So even if they had the best intentions, their framework is wrong.
Right. But isn't the point also, too, is to let Libya help themselves, to help Libya help themselves?
Well, right now, Libya cannot help itself.
They can't.
Right now, the idea of Libya is itself at stake. I mean, at this moment, the situation is so bad that there are two parliaments, one that meets in Tripoli, one that meets in Tobruk. The parliament that meets in Tobruk has just hired a Greek car passenger ferry, which it utilizes, it's going to utilize as a means to, transfer, to maintain in housing for the Libyan parliamentarians. So the situation in Libya is really bad. It's not in a good shape. But at the same time, the North African foreign ministers from Egypt, Tunisia, Algeria, Mali, etc., and Libya have been meeting in a process to create some kind of regional solution. And I very much believe that this regional setup is fundamentally important. The neighbors of Libya are feeling threatened. The countries like Tunisia and Algeria worry greatly about the spread of the chaos. So they need to be at the table with the Libyans, and at the same time, they need to also help close down their borders to prevent arms from coming in and out. So there needs to be some kind of regional, discussion, regional solution. Now, the United States has anyway left Libya. The embassy is closed down. In fact, one of the militia groups is using the swimming pool in the Libyan residence of the ambassador, as a recreational center. The British embassy is closed down. The UN has closed its office in Libya. So Libya currently is without any, Western people in there. The French continue to call for global action, what they say global action. But Libya doesn't need global action. Libya needs a regional solution. And I think it's very important to create some political space for the regional countries to assert themselves together, because they will all suffer if Libya continues to be in chaos.
You also said that the U.S. is trapped by their Turkish-Syrian policy and their inability to reconstruct an Iraqi state.
Well, look, firstly, if you take Iraq and Syria and take those two countries together, the United States is by its own understanding trapped. I mean, if you're going to help in Syria fight against the Islamic State, you're going to need to have at least a couple of things happen. One is you're going to have the border between Turkey and Syria closed, because just as the borders of Libya are porous and allow for various arms or fighters to enter, and the same thing in Syria, the Turkish border is not closed. Turkey is a NATO ally. The United States is uncomfortable, in a sense, demanding that Turkey, close down its border. At the same time, the fiercest fighters against the Islamic State have been the Kurdish Workers' Party. But the United States government and the Turks treat the Kurdish Workers' Party as a terrorist organization. Right. So that's why I mean that, there's a trap that the U.S. foreign policy is in the middle of. There's no clear line. I mean, I sympathize with people in Washington. They are sitting on a contradiction. I mean, this is precisely why, to unravel the contradiction, it's important, even in Syria, just as I've said for Libya, even in Syria, to bring the regional partners to the table, to put pressure on them to start a discussion. I mean, the United States can't solve all problems, but it can certainly help bring, its allies to the table. The Iranians are willing to have a conversation, but Saudi Arabia needs to feel U.S. pressure to come to the table and talk to Iran, because it's only if these countries agree and if they back off from their view that the Assad regime has to precipitously fall in Syria, can the Islamic State be contained. The group that now rules a very large part of land between northern Syria and Iraq. So for all that, unfortunately, U.S. foreign policy is in the middle of a terrible contradiction.
And so you also had said that the government in Tripoli pays the militias, the militia groups, which then in turn fight the government of Tripoli.
Well, this was called a great legacy period. After the Libyan state was destroyed, and the new government, backed by the Americans, came to power in Tripoli, they made a deal because they had no monopoly over violence. They made a deal with all the militias that they would pay everybody's salary, and they would all then be divvied out different parts of Libya to guard. One group, the Zintan and Misrata militias, were to guard the international airport. The militia of Abdul Karim Belhaj was to guard the Mitiga airport, which is right in the middle of town, etc. So they were all divided up sectors, and they were paid. Now the problem is, of course, they turned on the government, but the salaries continue to be paid. I mean, it's a very curious thing that the West basically acceded to. After NATO destroyed the Libyan state, the NATO countries agreed that this was a good way to manage, the setup.
We only have a few minutes left. What is it that you would like the American people to know? I think you said the media gave up on Libya. They're not, giving what's truly going on over there.
Well, look, it's a terrible thing, I mean, after all, it was United States heavy bombing that, basically took out the Libyan state and left, this sort of vortex, as I've called it, in Libya. And once this happened, the only thing the American people are interested in, it seems, is who killed the ambassador. Now, I understand that's a very important, very, very important, thing to look out for. Who killed an ambassador is something a country needs to investigate, needs to find out, etc. It's very important. But this has kind of eclipsed the whole collapse of Libya, which is a consequence partly of the NATO bombing. So it's a bizarre thing that you have such an important use of military force, and yet the population has largely forgotten it. And I saw recently there's a CNN poll that showed that something like 95% of the American public knows about the beheading of 2 American journalists.
Right.
Well, it's very important again that they know about this, because after all, those are American journalists. But it would be nice if more than 3% of the population know what's going on in Libya today, which is a direct consequence of the use of Western military force.
And it seems that a lot of aggression is always used. I mean, why is it always necessary? And I know you can't really answer this question, but for the United States to just always be using so much force and aggression.
Well, you're right. You're right to preface that by saying, it's not for me to answer. I mean, you have to get somebody from the U.S. State Department and ask them.
Also, there's supposedly a congressional investigation, but it's not really, caring about Libya as much as it is, Hillary seeking the presidency.
Yeah, I mean, this is a straightforward political investigation. I mean, it's true that, Hillary Clinton is running for president, or most likely is running for president. This is true. That's a fact. It is a fact that in her memoir, she has basically a whole chapter on Libya, and a very large section of it is defending what happened in Benghazi on September 11th, 2012. This is all true. It is also true that the American public should be curious about how one of its ambassadors, the highest representative you send to a foreign country, was killed. I mean, there's no question that these are things that need to be investigated. But at the same time, I think it would have been somewhat useful to have investigated or had a parallel investigation about what is the outcome when the United States uses military force in this way, and having ascertained what has been the outcome in Libya and in Iraq, whether it is valuable to use military force, that the outcomes of military force seem to be this. And then you can judge whether it's useful to repeat what you're going to do. I mean, tomorrow, Mr. Obama is going to speak about Syria. And if he says, we're going to use massive military bombardment against the Islamic State or the Assad regime or whatever he comes up with, I wonder if somebody in the White House has had a discussion. Well, what happened the last time we did this? How did that turn out? So, it's fine. You must have an investigation when an ambassador is killed. It's important to investigate when nationals are killed overseas, such as the two journalists, James Foley, Stephen Sotloff. That's very important. At the same time, it would be good if you have a rational foreign policy to investigate whether the outcomes of this kind of aerial bombardment have ever been good. And I don't think that kind of investigation is ever going to happen.
And just one last thing I wanted to ask you. Did you hear anything about Obama is supposed to be resigning over a video about the Benghazi attacks?
No, I don't know anything about that.
I'll have to send you a short video that I received in an article of a journalist that apparently somebody from these Benghazi attacks had a video of Hillary Clinton, and it was like really controversial. They had sent it to Fox News, who hasn't aired it, and they're not going to air it if Obama agrees to resign.
Well, I don't know. That's interesting, but I don't know anything about that.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I'll if you're interested, I'll send it to you. But so where can people find your work and your articles, Vijay?
Well, there are two places. They're both Indian periodicals. One is Frontline, which they can find on the web, and the website for Frontline is frontline.in, and the other is once a month in the editorial page of The Hindu, and that is thehindu.com.
I want to thank you so much, Vijay Prashad, for joining us, and I hope to have you back on Awake Radio again in the future.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Thank you so much. Thank you for listening to Organic News here on Awake Radio, and we have the next guest is Gary Sanders, who runs a meditation center in Los Angeles. And what is the name of your meditation center, Gary?
Well, it's a group. I don't actually have a brick and mortar center. The Sangha that I started in my community is called the Santa Clarita Mindfulness Group. I am also associated with Against the Stream in Los Angeles, which is a traditional. We have two centers in Los Angeles. That's where I received my training, and I've run groups there for 4 years or so.
And explain what Against the Stream is.
Against the Stream is a Theravadan meditation center that was founded by Noah Levine, who's written the books Dharma Punks and Against the Stream and Part of the Revolution. Now the new book that he wrote, Refuge Recovery, which is based on the Buddhist path-based recovery program that we developed at Against the Stream. And I was a part of the original groups with that program.
Because, back, this is like about 10 or so years ago when I worked at the Omega Institute. That's where I first met Noah up there and did meditation with him up there. And then he actually lived for a short while in New York City, and used to give the meditation out of the Layla yoga studio right off of Houston and the Bowery, and then he moved.
Yeah, but that those groups are still being held. Josh Korda, I think, runs those groups as the guiding teacher. But they still have a thriving Dharma Punks community in New York City.
Okay, good. I got to look that up again. So, why should people meditate, and who needs to meditate, and what is let's start with, what is the point of meditation? What is it?
Meditation is a practice to change your relationship with that which arises, both internally and externally. It's a practice to find acceptance and I'd even say happiness within the present moment and all that arises in the present moment. My meditation practice has been an exercise in learning to live lighter. I love using that term. I've methodically and gradually been able to shed all the things that I've carried around my whole life, all the the stories and the trauma and the resentments and the pain, the anger, the fear. Through my meditation practice, I've been able to discover, uncover, and discard a lot of that stuff, and really begin to find serenity and peace within the present moment and all the difficulties and the joys and everything that arises within the present moment.
And so obviously, the practice is going to vary from person to person. I mean, not everybody's going to be, able to, be where somebody else is. I mean, it's just about, the way that I, see meditation, when I was, again, at Omega, this man, Dina Bandhu from the Kripalu Center, he wrote on a board, and he wrote past, present, and future. And without the present moment, you have past and future, which basically just equals a vicious cycle, which is, ultimately by, I just think of meditation as, I don't ever think anybody's ever going to get it perfectly or be able to, do it perfectly. I just think it's a matter of pumping your brake pedal, just, pumping the brake so that there's more cushion. I feel like there's no cushioning in life. It's there's so much aggression, there's so much tightness and constriction, and meditation just basically teaches us to, try to create more of an airbag, so to speak.
Yeah, actually the thought came to mind. It gives us a cushion.
Yeah.
So it's not that we don't deny any of the stuff that's happening, or whether it's arising within us, the feelings, the emotions, or any of the external stuff. That of course it's there, of course it arises, but with our meditation practice, we begin to learn that we don't need to take that stuff personally. That we don't need to accept it as it's us. Our feelings are every bit of our identity. I am angry. I am scared. I am sad. The self-identification. We begin to learn that it's just phenomenon that arises and passes. Just like a cloud goes through the horizon. The emotions, the thoughts, the projections into the future, and the reminiscing of the past. It's just phenomena that arises and passes. You had mentioned earlier about not getting it perfect, and that's why we call it a practice. It's not a one and done kind of thing. We don't just go to one class, or we go on one retreat and then we're got it perfect the rest of our life. It's a gradual practice that we slowly begin to work on this lifetime of conditioning that we're carrying around with our with us. The all the things that we've gone through, and the things that we've experienced, and the things that we've all our trials and tribulations. We begin to gradually chip away at that stuff. To learn that that's not our identity. That it's this conditioned phenomena, that it's impermanent, that and we also begin to learn that whatever is arising in this moment, no matter how difficult and challenging it is, if we can stay in the moment using the tools that we learn in our meditation practice, then we begin to learn that it's something that we can handle, and it's not this overwhelming thing that we probably told ourselves our whole life. I can't get through this. I can't handle this.
There is a lot of overwhelm in this world. There's no question about it. Some people definitely are dealing with quite a tremendous amount of overwhelm. But I believe it's important, part of meditation, but right, like that the idea is not to, not feel your feelings, but to actually, feel your feelings and just breathe with them. It's not about not trying to feel your anger, but right. Or your fear, or your sorrow, or I guess even like your joy. But I guess most people don't try to not feel their joy, but and to just to accept like all of what we feel and integrate. Because I think of meditation the same way that I think of yoga. Like yoga is really meditation in motion, and it's all about integrating. Like we want to integrate like all of the parts of ourselves that got cut off, like that we weren't allowed to feel some decades ago, like anger, or for some people it's fear, for some people it's sexuality, and things like that. And so it's about like actually incorporating and integrating all of those parts of ourselves that we were kind of, told or made to feel we're not good or we're bad and we had to get rid of, and we're holding our breath trying to keep those taboo feelings at bay.
Right.
Where as if, right, like if we just breathe and let them in, which like I feel like that's what creates so much conflict in the world, is that, like I just had Vijay Prashad on. He's like a journalist, talking about like the conflicts that's been going on in Libya and Syria. And, I really believe that that's what creates all the conflicts all over the world, is that people aren't necessarily in conflict with somebody else or some other country. They're in conflict with that part of themselves that person is expressing.
Of course, yeah. That's the big thing about meditation is we begin to change our relationship to all that stuff that you've mentioned. It's not about repressing it. I came from a very repressive environment, where I grew up in a really repressive religion with my parents, and so that was a real part of our family. That on the exterior everything's fine. Meanwhile, we're just stuffing down all the difficult, the painful, the whatever, and so it's not repressing, it's not running away from, it's learning to meet all that stuff with compassion, and with forgiveness and with love.
Exactly. Yeah, because I used to sort of get the impression that in meditation, because it was about that, like you're trying to just kind of walk around with this, this smile on your face like all the time, which is like a little bit unrealistic to expect from anyone. You know,
Right.
like it's about, you know, trying to reach some, you know, Buddhist level of enlightenment. And if that's, you know, right, I mean, you know, if we fall short of that or something, like we're just going to, you know, beat ourselves up, which is kind of contradictory to really what it is. And what I believe that, you know, the system wants us to do, you know, is to hold ourselves to a ridiculous level, an impossible, you know, standard. I mean, because, you know, sometimes it's like, you know, and just in light of everything that's been going on lately, you know, like, I mean, just, it was just a couple of weeks ago, actually, I do some filming and photography, like at protests and things like that, which are happening quite often in New York. And there was a, you know, anti-police brutality in front of City Hall. And, you know, like the subject came up, you know, someone had mentioned how, you know, it's always like the little guy, you know, like, because the powers that be are like pretty much out of control. Like that's what's going on. Like the people at the top, you know, they do whatever they want and have like all of this impunity. And the little guy, you know, is always expected to walk this fine line, like walk this perfect line. And if they're, and, you know, like, so if the little guy has kind of like a normal reaction of anger or lashing back, you know, it's always like, you know, their fault, you know. And so sometimes like I can kind of, you know, I just don't want to feel that like, right, like that's what, you know, because the people that are going to meditate, you know, like right, like the powers that be, like they're not going to meditate. They're not going to say, oh yeah, you know, I think I need to go to like a meditation class. So, you know, like I just don't want to think of it like, you know, the little guy just always kind of being held to a certain standard, because I feel like anyone that's going to voluntarily go to a meditation class probably at their worst is never going to be as bad as the people, you know, with like a lot of the power and money that are, you know, out of control in many instances.
Yeah, you know, one thing that just came when you're discussing that, you know, there's that one senator Ryan that recently wrote a book on mindfulness. So, you know, there is some hope that those in power are maybe starting to look at meditation.
Really, a senator?
Yeah. I can't remember his first name, but yeah, Senator Ryan wrote a book on mindfulness and has been actively going out and speaking about mindfulness to you know, all of America. So there's hope. You know, I mean, mindfulness is a buzzword within the psychiatric community. You know, within some school systems.
Right.
You know, so I do have hope. You know, I do want to circle back to a point that you made before that about some of the ideas of meditation. And, you know, I know a big hindrance for me when I went to sit down and meditate 20 years ago. You know, I read these books, and you know, to me, Buddhism kind of resonated deeply within me. But when I went to sit down and meditate, I had this unrealistic expectation that I'm going to meditate and I'm not going to completely empty my brain of all thought.
Right.
You know, that I'll find this blissful state of Zen. You know, this buzzword Zen. And you know, when I actually went and sat and tried to meditate, it didn't happen. You know, my mind was all over the place, jumping around from thought to thought, from, you know, sensation to sensation, and you know, and I met all that immediately with, you know, I'm doing this wrong, or I don't know how to do this. You know, I can't do this. And I hear that with all the groups that I lead, all the people that I meet. It's a very common thing that people have this expectation that meditation means to rid yourself of all thoughts and feelings and emotions. And that is, you know, with Vipassana, with the practice that we do anyway, that's an unrealistic goal. You know, again, just like we were saying earlier, the goal is to change our relationship to that which arises, not to deny, not to repress, not to rid ourselves of that, but to just change our relationship with it. If it's difficult, if it's painful, we meet it with compassion. If it's pleasurable and good, we meet it with unattached appreciation. So, we accept it for what it is. We know that it's impermanent, that it arises and it passes.
Hopefully it passes quickly.
Well, that's the judgment. Quickly, if we have that expectation of quickly, we're going to suffer over it. It's going to last as long as it's going to last. It's all conditioned phenomena. So it arises when the conditions are present. It lasts as long as the conditions are present, and when the conditions fade away, then the reaction, the phenomena passes away.
I also think that what's good about meditation, or what one of the points of it is to really anchor oneself in the present moment by just sitting and feeling the clothes on your skin, feeling your the cushion or the chair that you're sitting on,
or just paying attention to the breath.
Yeah,
the breath that's always there. Yeah.
Right, I really believe that paying attention to to the breath is one of the most important things that a person can do in life, just based on the sheer fact that the breath, it's incoming and it's outgoing, and that illustrates that we live in a releasing and a taking in world, because it's so easy to get out of balance where people are either, always, taking and not giving, and some people maybe are giving and not, receiving, and by reintroducing yourself back to, because, one of the things that I really feel is that our, society, country, world in general has diverted severely away from nature and the way that nature and natural law and the way that the body and the mind-body connection function, and that, sitting and following the breath, especially, the in and out, the receiving and the releasing, which helps us to get more in touch with being in balance. It's supposed to be, give and take, night and day, not, just all one way.
Right. Yeah, that's, grounding ourselves in the present moment is so foreign to most of it, especially in our Western world. If we really sit and look at what we're bombarded with, the advertising, the commercials, the things that we hear on the radio or the internet, we're never pretty enough. We're never smart enough. We don't have a big enough house. We don't have a new enough car. If we pay attention to all that stuff that's around us, it all it's doing is taking us out of the present moment. You're not going to be happy until you get X, Y, and Z. Until you spend your money over here and buy this and show your neighbors that you have this, you're not going to be happy. It's everything around us is wired to take us out of the present moment, and so that's the great thing. In leading the groups that I lead, and I teach in prison, I teach in my community, I teach in recovery groups, people, that are addicted to drugs and alcohol and all sorts of things. And, I teach stuff to kids. And so many people tell me that after, one of their first or second sessions, they're just so surprised, I've never really done this before. I've never really, been in the moment. I've never, they're surprised at how much peacefulness they can find in the present moment when they really pay attention to something as simple as the breath.
Yeah, I'm glad that you just said that, because it brings me back again to that we need to come back to the way that nature works, and in the capitalist society that is always about like getting to the next thing, and the fact that I really feel that nature's process, which is, going slow, is really being eliminated, out of our daily lives, and just, it sounds so simple by just kind of slowing down and paying attention to the breath, that it's, to me, this is key. Like, to me, this is the key to life right here, is to literally just slow down, right, be in the moment more, pay attention to your breath, and just do things slower in order to bring back nature, and because like that is like incorporating nature back into everything. Nature, which is being really, depleted, and natural resources, not just on the earth, but within us. Like, our natural resources are being also depleted, and by everything just going so quickly, and I really believe that meditating can help with our relationships, like, and giving other, because most people in life don't get to live so much authentically. We're doing what somebody else wants, like you have to have a job and make money and do what whatever you got to do to have money. And we don't necessarily people don't get to even listen to what that little, the voice inside of them has been so drowned out.
Yeah. Well, that's the one thing, I can speak for myself, or what I've gained in my meditation practice is, you talked about nature and whatnot, but the thing that always comes to me in my practice is, noticing the interconnection of everything. How deeply connected I am to nature and to the animals around me, and to not just the people that are directly in my life, my loved ones, my friends, but all the people, the people that I don't know, that picked the food in the field that I'm eating right now, the people that drove it to the packaging plant or whatever, the people that paved the road I'm driving on, that there's just this interconnected web that when we slow down, when we're present, and we begin to really recognize that interconnection, and then that translates into relationships, just like you said, that through our practice we begin to start to really change the quality of our presence around the people in our lives. Instead of just being focused on how we're going to jump in the conversation, or how we're going to poke our story into this conversation. We slow down. We watch our breath, and we really listen to others, and without thinking about how we're going to jump in or how we're going to respond immediately.
Right.
And really begin to change the quality of our presence that, I know I didn't have that before. I was rarely really present with someone. I was always off in my head, thinking about, what I can add, how I'm going to look good in this situation, or, what I'm going to do, 10 minutes from now or half an hour from now or whatever, and just seeing, it's a gradual thing, but, seeing that deep interconnection and that really deep, rich quality of presence, show up in my relationships with all the people that I deal with.
Right, and listening, again, is such an important, skill. I grew up reading a lot of books on relationship skills and conscious communication, and listening, and again, it just keeps coming down to like having a cushion. Like, I just feel like we're in a really, like, it's not a luxury anymore that people need to learn relationship skills. There's so much in society about getting over, about screwing somebody, for money or whatever. And instead of having win-win situations, instead of, being concerned of, doing business in a way that, your customer or your patient or whoever it is also going to benefit. And it's not just about, getting money out of someone, profit at all costs, kind of thing, which, I just wonder sometimes, how do people, go to work and have just sort of like that profit at all cost attitude and then come home and relate, to a family which, functions in the complete opposite way as that, without that mentality kind of spilling over. Again, it's all about the way that nature works and dealing, because, relationships are sustaining. This is one thing that sometimes, I don't, I don't understand how people can miss it. I think about farming and how, organic farming, we need nutrition to come from the, the gardening and the farming that we do, so it is with relationships. Like, you want to cultivate, organic relationships. And if people just have relationships that are not based on honesty and they're just, thinking about what they can get out of somebody, you're basically screwing yourself, because you're not creating something that's allowing you to be sustained and have relationships that can grow and bear fruit, which can, then in turn be nutritious, that's going to sustain all of us. I just think of relationships the same way as farming.
Well, and what comes up for me is that what you're talking about. I mean, that comes across so clearly, when you're dealing with somebody, with that energy that comes from, when you know somebody's very selfish and it's all about them, and it's not win-win. It's about, them, needing to get one over on you, that kind of thing. I mean, that just comes across so clearly. And that's bringing mindful listening, mindful communication into, your relationships, whether it's romantic, platonic, business, relationships. I know it's a rare treat when you're dealing with somebody that is really present, really listening, and really offering their whole self to you, rather than trying to doing the normal kind of the selfish thing. I think it's a really rare gift when somebody's truly present with you.
So let me ask you a question. For instance, you're having to deal with a really difficult person, who's not mindful and just who's all about themselves, and whatever it is that they're trying to get you to do or whatever. How would you respond? Or just for the people in general who are listening that that maybe need to just deal with difficult people. How would you approach the situation?
Well, that's the thing. I know what it was like for me before, and I know what it's like now, and the comparison. I know I used to take everything so personally. The job I had. When I was much younger, I worked in a retail environment, and people would come in and they were really upset and angry and weren't happy with whether it's the product they received or the service they received, and I would get so defensive right away. I'd take it personally and get defensive, and it was instantly an adversarial kind of conflict. And with my practice. And again, it's been gradual, and I've consciously had to work on not taking things personally. Now when somebody's upset, I can feel compassion towards them. That they're angry, they're upset, and like, oh, I can see you're angry. Figuring out, is there something I can do to make them not so upset? Is there something within my power to fix the situation? And then also finding that discernment. That maybe they're taking something out on me. Somebody else harmed them, and now they're so full of this hurt and this what fear or anger or whatever, that it's now spilling off onto me. And just okay, well, if that's the case, maybe I need to set a boundary. Maybe this isn't a situation I can fix, and I need to take a breath and then decide whether this is something I want to continue with or to end.
Right, like, yeah, that's what I was actually, I'm glad you said that, because you do have to protect yourself.
Yeah, we don't need to become doormats. That's not the part of meditation does not require us to be pushovers or doormats. It requires us to be present in the moment, and being present in the moment requires discernment. Something that discernment takes time and development.
Right.
We begin to learn to trust our gut a lot of times.
Well, that's where it also kind of where you have to kind of admit where you are in your practice.
Right.
Exactly. Right. I mean, so it doesn't necessarily have to be about the other person or whatever, and except just the fact that you just have to admit what you are and are not capable of dealing with, because you're only so far along in your practice.
Yeah. And that's one thing. In Buddhism, we have this thing called sangha. It's the Pali word that the Buddha used, but it means community, and it's something the Buddha talks about, taking refuge in sangha, refuge in the community of like-minded individuals. So we have centers, we have groups. I created the sangha within my community, and we're all in it together. I mean, we're interconnected. We show up in practice together. But it's not just about practicing together. It's also checking in with each other with our daily lives. We're not a lone island. We're not a lone wolf. That we hopefully have people that we can check in with and bounce ideas off of, and or maybe ask advice or just having someone to mindfully listen to you so you could vent a little bit.
Exactly.
That's a big part of interconnection to me. That I love the quote from Martin Luther King that we may have all arrived in different ships, but we're all in this boat together.
Exactly.
So we're one of my really good friends says we might all be crazy, but we're not all crazy at the same time. So maybe we get overwhelmed sometimes. Maybe we get upset sometimes, but checking in with another person. And
right.
Hey, was this the skillful response? Could I have done this a little better? Is there a way I could, maybe go back and ask for forgiveness or fix something or apologize or whatever it is.
Because in order for, I just think of it the same way I think of my cell phone. And, I have to plug in and charge the battery on my cell phone if I, expect it to work. And so, just like you and, anyone and people that practice meditation, you need other people to be able to kind of plug in and sometimes just be and sort of, feel whatever it is that you need to feel, and recharge your battery. Because if you're just like out there, trying to teach maybe meditation to other people or, and having, and using up like your battery, you need a place to plug in and other people to that will just kind of let you just be your, your old unskilled kind of, not so composed self sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah, hopefully in a safe environment. with somebody that you can trust. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, okay, where can people find your meditation group?
Well, my particular group, my Sangha that I started is in, I live in Santa Clarita, California. It's a northern suburb of Los Angeles. So, within my community, I teach twice a week. We're found on meetup.com. If you look up SCV Mindfulness Group, we have a Facebook group. We're in community calendars within Santa Clarita. But the greater Sangha that I'm a part of, that I did my training with, is Against the Stream Buddhist Meditation Society. It's againstthestream.org is the website. We have 2 centers in Los Angeles. We just started one in San Francisco. We have one in Nashville. There's a lot of associated other groups, maybe not with dedicated centers, but different Dharma Punks groups throughout the country. You can go to dharmapunks.com to find those groups.
Right, that's Dharma Punks with an X.
With DHARMA and then PUNX.com.
Right.
So just within Los Angeles at our 2 centers, we have pretty much every single night we have an event. We have a class or a drop-in group. We have morning meditations. We have day-longs. We have retreats that we do throughout the year.
Yeah. Can you, because we only have a few minutes left, can you just give a 2-minute guided meditation for the last couple of minutes?
Sure, yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
So just wherever you are, whether you're sitting, standing, just check in with your body. See how you're feeling. If you're in a chair or sitting on a cushion, just noticing the points of contact that you're making with the chair or cushion. And really just feeling what it feels like to be you in this moment. Letting go of what happened before, letting go of any plans for later, but just really plugging into the present moment. And it's so easy to do that with the breath. We can just pay attention to the in-breath and the out-breath. Just allow it to go its natural pace. You don't need to control it or think about it or will it to happen. Just meeting each breath with kind, gentle awareness. Breathing in and out. Just noticing, is it a quick breath or a long breath? Is it coarse or smooth? Noticing temperatures, or the difference between the in-breath and the out-breath. Just allowing yourself to relax into the sensation of breathing. And when you go about the rest of your day, you start to feel overwhelmed, you feel angry or sad or anything that's challenging at all, you can always tap into the breath. A few mindful breaths, center yourself, ground yourself with whatever is happening around you or within you.
Thank you so much, Gary Sanders, for joining us, and I hope you can be on the show again. It's 8 o'clock over here. And, keep meditating and keep teaching people to meditate, because I think the world really needs it.
Well, thank you so much, Kat. It was a real pleasure, and I'd be happy to be on again anytime.
Great. Thank you for tuning in to this September 9th, Tuesday, Organic News here on Awake Radio. Please tune in again next Tuesday and follow your breath. Thank you.
Be well.
Bye-bye.